Welcome to the Monday, September 17th meeting of the Montpelier Design Review Committee. I will let members and staff introduce themselves.
Hannah Smith.
Liz Pritchett.
Meredith Crandall, staff.
Stephen Everett.
Eric Gilbertson. Seth Mitchell.
For anybody who has not been here before, we're advisory to the Development Review Board. We will review each of the applications and move them forward. Unless anybody has anything else to offer, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda we have?
A second.
Second, all in favor of the agenda, raise your hand. The agenda is approved. First application on the agenda is for 47 Court Street. Welcome back.
It's Jana Walder for Capital City Partners.
You have your name?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yep, it's on the application.
Okay. So describe your wall.
So there's some concrete jersey barriers in the back of the parking lot that we'd like to replace with a decorative stone retaining wall. It's not stone, it's like the big blocks.
Concrete blocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engineered concrete.
Yeah.
With
As a
Yep,
pattern-
have a
pattern
picture.
of it,
Yep.
Yes.
And this is the existing barrier. Okay.
And
First I missed the decimal point between the 2 and the 5, and I thought, whoa, 25 feet tall.
oops.
Yeah, this level on.
And the neighbors have it on their property, so it'll be nice and cohesive. Same.
No, it looks much nicer, there's no question.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments, questions, suggestions?
You have a construction
Yep.
question. I just
Sorry.
saw a sheet. Are you
I'm
gonna
off my
put it on
game.
a photo?
No, it's okay.
Leaving?
Set 'em down.
Yeah, just set them down. There'll be some drainage behind it done properly, so the people who are installing the retaining wall are taking care of that.
Usually they put crushed stone behind it with some drainage.
Yeah.
And set the stones and they'll stay there for a long time. There's a criteria sheet, I'll just read right through this for the project. Preservation or reconstruction of the appropriate historic style of the proposed project in the historic district, also historic structure acceptable. Harmony of exterior design acceptable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials within the purpose of the district acceptable. Compatibility of proposed landscaping, we'll say that this is acceptable as a part of landscaping. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, buildings, color schemes, or exterior materials acceptable. Location and appearance of all utilities not applied for. Recognition of and respect for view corridors and significant vistas, including gateway views of the city and state house, acceptable. All in favor of the application as proposed, raise your hand. And we'll get you to sign this form. And the little name corner right above the name. Thank you. Okay. And is that administratively approved,
No.
or does that have to come back before the development review
Yeah.
board?
DRB in 2 weeks,
Okay,
on October 1st.
sounds good,
And
thanks.
I will be in touch if I get anything more from Department of Public Works, any questions from them.
Yep. Zach has seen it.
Yeah.
He's been out there, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And has anyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes from September the 4th?
It's fine to me, I believe.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes from the 4th? Minutes are approved. And there is agenda, an informal review of an art installation, Montpelier Fine Arts. Were you here for that?
I am.
Well, good.
And we do have a recommendation form. It will be just strictly recommendations, and you'll be able to keep it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Katie Gustafson. I work up at the college, and I don't know if it's helpful if I give a little bit of background in terms of
Sure.
why. So several months ago, maybe even 6 months ago now, several of our programs got excited about the For Freedoms movement that is sort of a nationwide movement where artists are trying to do all kinds of different events prior to midterm elections. And they're trying to do it with sort of nonpartisan, so not about candidates specifically, but just sort of raising ideas that they want to see people thinking about in a broader way. So our graphic design program and visual art program came to senior staff at the college, and we started talking about different things we might be able to do. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a sign-making event in correspondence with this, but that's pretty much all internal. But this was sort of an external piece of what was going on, and I felt like it was important to keep the city in the loop, tell people a little bit about what it is we were up to, so that if people had questions, there'd be an opportunity to do that, because it is a small town, and I think often as people who either live in the community, you all may be turned to and asked what's going on, and I was hoping to just sort of get in front of you so you would have a face with a name that you could point people to and also ask any questions that you might have.
So where is this going?
On the green.
On the green,
Yeah.
so.
As you come up East State Street, sort of right at the corner of East State Street and West Street. And until I think they actually
West, okay.
come and start putting it down, they won't know exactly the exact location.
Right, so it's this whole image.
It is that
Uh-huh.
image. And our
It'll be
plan
large,
is to
12
put,
by 8.
12 by 8, sorry, is to put a little bit of information, and it may very well just be this 2 pages on the back side, so that as people are in the area, we wouldn't put it on the front side of the sign, but on the
Yeah.
back side. Also talking about doing sort of a little scan thing, perhaps, that people could put their phone up to and get even more information
Oh, I
about
see.
what it's all about.
So I did try and give a general idea
Yep.
of where it was
That's
gonna
exactly
go.
right,
Right, I
yes.
see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are there any examples of what is going to be displayed in contemporary art?
That's it.
Just that's it right there?
Yep.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was all,
Sure,
or if
yep.
there was any additional.
Nope, that's it.
okay.
So is this a super graphic or is it painted? How is it?
That's a great question. I'm guessing that it might be that.
Super graphic on plywood?
Yeah.
Sheet graphic
Yep.
plywood? That's only there for a couple of months.
Less than that, a little over a month.
And is it, how is it in relation to the grade?
There's, I would say, essentially no grade right there.
Have any of the artists worked with the Native American Affairs Council?
I shouldn't speak for exactly who he's worked with, but he does. He's very connected, and in fact, I know there was a call today just to see if they might like to either come to the sign-making event that's happening up at the college in one of our classrooms at the end of September, and or even come when this gets installed as part of that. And I don't know where that conversation went today. I wasn't actually at that meeting.
I think I've still got my Abenaki driver's license, horsing Francis County driver's license. I can still have it. And no Native American art is going to be incorporated at all.
Not as part of this temporary installation.
there could be as part of the sign-making event on the 30th. No, I think, so I don't know if it's plywood or if it's like a canvas material, so it's just whatever it's on and then some 2x4s that hold it in place.
It wasn't too long ago, yeah, Mackey's playing the whole line.
Some people up on the lake in Swan, they were sweating it for a while.
Yeah.
So until they worked that out.
It's interesting, fish ends and all of that.
So we approach this as a temporary art exhibit.
Yeah, and I mean, it technically, it doesn't need any zoning permits at all, but we wanted to run it by you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, suggestions, anything to add?
No, just, so we'll be working with the Abnakis.
Yeah.
That would, they
Definitely,
it could be very sensitive if they're left out.
right.
From a practical standpoint, I mean, there are a lot of kids that are on there doing.
Absolutely,
As
and-
long as it's kid-proof. I
Yep.
think.
Yep, kid-proof, and also we know that things happen, so we don't plan to police it, and, what will happen will happen.
It should be okay.
Yeah.
I'll read down through the criteria, and again, this is just something that you can go down through, and then we can give this to you. As you said, there's no official application required. Preservation or reconstruction of the appropriate historic style of the proposed projects in the historic district that involves a historic structure. It's really not historic style, I'll just say not applicable here.
Yeah.
Harmony of exterior design with level properties in the district. Again, temporary art is acceptable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials with other properties in the district acceptable. Compatibility of proposed landscaping, none applied for as part of this application. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, buildings, color schemes, or exterior materials, acceptable. Location and appearance of all utilities, no lighting for the sign, correct?
Not at this point. I know at one point somebody did mention maybe some of those solar, just little round things, but certainly nothing permanent.
So, not applicable, and again, a little solar light like that, temporarily installation, just plug those in the ground and we don't need to do anything with
Yeah.
it. Recognition of and respect for view quarters and significant vistas, including gateway views of the city and state house. Acceptable. So, all who agree with it, even though it's not an official vote, all who agree with the temporary art, go for it. Go for it, raise your hand.
Is this the color that you have as part of your college colors?
I wouldn't
Looks
think
a little,
so.
Looks a little more yellow, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
You want to just give that to her, do you want to keep a copy?
I don't need a
It's
copy.
not official.
Not official.
Meredith, I want to thank you. I hadn't realized it was you.
Oh.
So it's nice to put a face with a name, and thank you. Really appreciate your help, and thank you all for your time tonight, and I hope to see you again.
Welcome.
Good luck
Thank
with
you,
your
Kate.
Thank
project.
you. Take care.
Have fun.
Bye-bye.
Anybody have anything else to add?
A couple of things. The city meeting, city council meeting, Wednesday night, 6:30, they're going to talk, the garage is the only thing they're going to talk about. And it's coming here October 1st, right?
Yep.
So,
And you said there were new regulations.
Yeah, it's the new 2018 regulations have to apply. So you guys won't have new regulations, because yours won't have been dealt with yet, but and it comes here October 21st, assuming that they get a full application package to us on this Friday. Because all we have so far is the sketch plan for the subdivision application. So we have to get the actual full site plan application for the 21st.
but the other thing is, that I think everybody got an email, you sent out the announcement of the training for design review committees Friday and Saturday in White River.
Yep. Did you get that, Seth? No, then maybe you aren't getting emails from me. You might want to see if I'm on your blocked list or something. Because I double checked and I pulled the email address from Audra's email that she had last sent to you.
Okay.
I'm not able to attend on Friday. Try to go Saturday.
I'll be there on Friday.
Real nice to people that give $50,000 to projects. So,
Yes, that helps.
So, I have a question. What is the impetus behind city bond for this particular?
Honestly, I don't want to say right now because I can't remember the exact reason it switched hands. Part of it may have been the larger size needed, but I can't, I don't want to misspeak on that one.
based on the TIF taxing financing, where there has to be a public benefit in that door. You can't have, and I think that's right, Warren.
I mean, that's part of it. There might be some other reasons
So
too.
the city will outright own it at Montpelier?
Yeah. Including most of the land underneath.
They're gonna then lease it to the hotel.
They're gonna lease a certain number of spots to the hotel. That's still part of the design. They're trying not to tweak the design too much since it's already gone through the whole process.
Somebody said something really, in one of the hearings, said something
Yeah.
really kind of redressing on the concrete block or
Yeah.
something.
I saw that.
With green lipstick, I
Yes,
think.
green
Yeah.
lipstick. There's only so much you can do to a parking garage.
Well, it depends on how much money.
Well, and that's the other thing.
Well, I mind it if you spend a little money.
Yeah.
My concern is it's just getting bigger.
Yeah.
So big blocks.
So will it be something?
My understanding is that some of the spaces will be metered, and some of them will be leased out with passes to blocks of people.
They're losing quite a few parking places, not behind that, those ticket bars.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I
How
can't remember
many?
the exact breakdown.
I'm not sure they made all those decisions either.
I
Come
have.
Wednesday night?
Yeah, or stay tonight at 7. The first informal presentation to the DRB is tonight, after a couple of shorter hearings. I mean, it's gonna be a while, probably gonna be 8 o'clock before they start on it tonight. But you could come back.
It's getting way too close to bedtime.
Tell me about it. I'll get home and all three, my husband and both boys are gonna be sound asleep.
Okay, sounds good. Unless anybody has anything else, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Yay.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor of adjournment, raise your hand. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Development Review Board for the City of Montpelier, our meeting for Monday, September 17th, 2018. My name is Daniel Richardson. I'm the chair of the Development Review Board, and the other members from my right are
Rob Goodwin,
Meredith Crandall, staff. Kate McCarthy.
Ryan Kane.
Okay. First item of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I have... I want to make a clarification. It's printed under other business, but the last item of business that we'll be taking up today is the informal review of 100 State Street, the new garage proposal that's being proposed, I think, jointly by the city and Bashara. And that's not a actual formal sketch plan. It is an informal review, so it's just under other business as opposed to an actual item of business that we're going to take action on, because that's not the intent tonight. But other than that, is there a motion to either approve the agenda or to amend the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the agenda as printed.
Okay, motion by Kate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. We have an agenda. There are no other comments from the chair tonight. The approval of the minutes of September 4th will have to be put off to next meeting because we lack a quorum on that. And that brings us to our first application of the evening, 9 Pearl Street. Is the applicant for 9 Pearl Street. Please, sir, if you'll come forward.
Phil, could you turn off that air conditioning unit right there, please?
We usually get in trouble with
That one gets
one's
turned off
okay?
and on all the time.
All right. I'm happy to.
Power button in the middle.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sound.
So if you'll state your name for the record, please.
John Bootle.
Mr. Bootle, just so you know, normally we are composed of 7 members this evening. Due to absences and conflicts, we're down to the bare minimum quorum. So we can proceed with the 4 members that are before you tonight, or it's your right to ask to have this postponed to be heard by the full board. So that's a decision that you're welcome to make.
Well, I'd have to ask your advice because I've never been to these before, so I would need you to advise me whether it's in my interest to come back or whether it's in my interest to stay. You know, I'm looking for some advice here.
Sure. Well, we can't necessarily give that advice, which is the problem, but what I can say is that the way in which the board works, and the reason why we offer that, is that out of 7 members, if you want your permit approved, 4 have to vote in the affirmative. Notwithstanding the fact that there's only 4 of us tonight, it means all 4 of us would have to vote in the affirmative because that number remains the same. And so, and that
So
would go
you're
for...
saying that if there's 7 of you, I get a better chance?
Well, it's mathematically speaking, but it's also in the nature of your approval, which is to say if you were going for a permit that had no controversy, was very straightforward, it may not matter whether there were 7 of us or 4 of us. If there is some controversy and there is a likely split of the vote, obviously you're playing against the odds in that respect.
Okay. Bearing that in mind, I will come back because I noticed that Meredith has written a report that I'm looking for your discretion to approve. So I will, if there's more of you, I guess there's more of you to have more discretion.
That's perfectly acceptable, and what we'll do is we'll simply table this application until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be the first Monday in October, and the calendar is not helping me out.
Well, I need
October 1st.
I see those on the bottom. Okay.
Oh, no, sorry, your head is literally in front of the calendar right behind me.
It's just...
Oh, it's on the agenda? Oh, okay.
All right. I will do that and come back and see you when hopefully you have more people.
We have to make we do have to make that motion in the affirmative, so.
I'll make a move that we continue the application for 9 Pearl Street until October 1st, 2018 meeting.
Okay, motion by Ryan. Do I have a second? Second that. Okay, second by Rob. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of tabling the application until the October 1st meeting, please raise your right hand. All right, Mr. Rudel, well, good luck, and
I will
we'll
see
see
you.
if the odds are in your favor next time.
I'll see you later.
Take care.
It's bound to happen. It's a good application.
The next applicant is 156 Elm Street, and that is Joe and Lucy Ferrata.
Yep.
Is that? If you'll introduce yourself.
I'm Joe Ferrata. I'm the owner of 156 Elm Street.
Okay, and Mr. Ferrata, you heard what I told Mr. Boodle, which is the same that goes for you. You're welcome to go forward tonight with 4 members, or you're welcome to ask for us to table it.
Yeah, I think I want to move forward. However, if it so happens the decision is not in my favor, can I sort of ask for the item to be on the agenda at a subsequent meeting?
Yeah, I don't think we have a sort of formal motion to reconsider, but I'll tell you what we can do, which I think may make just as much sense, is if you have a weather report from the board that seems to indicate that there's some difficulty.
Okay.
You may wish to say, I'd like to table it. So anything short of a vote. I think once we cast the vote, we cast the vote. And
Alrighty.
there are formal motions to reconsider, although they're not necessarily adopted into our procedure. But I think it would be the wiser course to simply ask for a weather report at a certain point and I think you'll tell from the tone of.
Okay, sounds good.
We can, I know Kate's looking troubled. We can continue the hearing so that he can provide more information if need be at another hearing. Does that
Right.
make more sense to you, Kate?
That makes sense for this applicant. I wonder if the other applicant. Or if it's just
I think that made sense for Mr. Boodle, having
Okay.
written my staff report.
Thank you.
And
Okay, and it was not requested by the previous applicant, it has been now, so
Right.
thank you.
if not asked, not received. So, Mr. Ferrata, I ask you to raise your right hand and I'll put you under oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give for the matter under consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Right. Please let us, give us a description of what you're proposing.
So basically, it's a landscaping plan, and so what we're doing, the matter at issue is a landscaping plan. What we're
Right.
doing is we're converting, it's a 4-unit building. It's on Elm Street, 156, as I said, and one of the units is currently an office, and we're bringing it back to a residential unit as a permitted use, right? And so the zoning administrator has reviewed it, and it's sort of a minor plan request, so forth. And so the issue at hand is around the landscaping, where right now there is less landscaping than required. So I'm asking for a waiver.
Of the landscaping requirements, and to be
That's correct.
specific.
I think that's the issue at hand.
That's at least the issue, a controversy. But before we dive into the landscaping, I think it makes sense to just get simply on the record the nature of the application, the non-controversial aspects, according to staff comment. You're proposing, this is on the 4th floor, is that?
It's actually,
Or number 4 unit, I'm sorry.
Right, so it's the unit in the front of the building. There's 2 units in the front of the building, that's where the access is, and it's 2nd and 3rd floor, basically.
And Meredith, as a result of this change, is there a parking increase or decrease? Or no change?
Neither really. I mean, at most you'd have a decrease in the amount of parking required, that somebody might want. There's really no change needed to the parking plan whatsoever. They, probably don't need as many parking spaces, but they're not going to make any changes to the layout.
Right, this is just strictly an internal change.
Yeah.
Yep, and then they've made some changes to the landscaping plan at my suggestion, because that was the only thing that did not meet the requirements, really. It was the
Okay.
only reason that this was not just approved administratively.
Sure, and I'm going through just the general standards that you're not changing the lighting, the principal building remains the same, we're within the residential densities, the lot size is in accord with the district, the street frontage is not changing, the setbacks are not changing, the height of the building's not changing. There's nothing that's implicating erosion, steep slopes, wetlands, riparian areas, stormwater management, access and circulation. And that was my question really about the parking, was to make sure that we're not changing the number of parking spaces. So whatever this business had allocated before, it has the same number of parking spaces. And that will be sufficient for the residential use. One note is there's no indication about bicycle storage. And more than anything, what we want to understand is just people who are using bicycles that are living at the apartment, is there a place for them to be stored, either in the apartment or on the grounds?
Yes.
Okay, and where would that be?
So a couple of the units have a storage in the back, and it's attached to the main building. So that takes care of them. And then there's a shed that also could be utilized as a storage unit.
And you've made that available to tenants
Oh, yeah.
for bicycle storage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions about any of the other issues before we dive into the world of landscaping? So, my understanding from the application is that you currently have, I believe, 2 hydrangea in the front and 3 lilac shrubs in the back. And you're proposing, what is your proposal?
Let's see, so let me go to page 8, I think. And so we're proposing a couple more hydrangeas and up to, say, 3 trees. And so the issue with this particular location is the lack of landscaping and the fact that if there's a little bit of grass, that it's whatever you plant there is going to get ruined by the snowplow in the wintertime. So say either side of the house, there's really no place to plant anything and have a chance to survive. And then the issues around the back is kind of like where, you're going to be pushing snow onto shrubs or trees that you've just planted. So there's limited places for pushing. So if you look at some of the pictures all the way back, so behind the garage, there's a green area, and so there's some shrubs there, and so potentially we could plant, say, up to 3 trees there. Excuse me. And we could plant a couple of shrubs in the front, but it's limited in terms of what we can do both sides.
And just so I understand, on either side of the house, I'm looking at the pictures that you've submitted, are those driveways on either side?
Yes.
Of the house?
Yeah. So, say if we're looking at the house from the street, on the left-hand side, it's the driveway that belongs to the property, and that driveway sometimes gets accessed by the neighbors on the left-hand side as well. So there's quite a bit of traffic, but there's a limited amount of space to plant anything in. On the right-hand side, if you're looking at the house from the street, you can see that there's a parking lot there where the cars are parking on a diagonal, and the cars park maybe a couple of feet from the actual porch of the house on the right-hand side. So again, not much space. And so between that and the fact that snow is going to get pushed, I don't think anything has a chance of surviving it. The front, we could definitely plant a couple more shrubs, and we could plant a couple of, crabapple trees in the front as well, that would work. And that's probably a place where it would have the most impact. And sort of in the area that I mentioned before, which is behind the garage, that sort of green area where there's grass there, obviously, and then there's shrubs and a couple of trees alongside the buildings. So it's kind of limited that way.
So at least in the front yard, if there were additional trees, how much space, well, let me strike that. Let me step back. How much space between your front porch and the sidewalk is there?
The most 10 feet, maybe. Yeah, the most. So there's a walkway in the middle. Yeah.
Is this the number we would be looking at on the diagram with the proposed?
Yeah, roughly. This is kind of an old diagram, but just, yeah, it's...
14 and a half, a ballpark?
Yeah, it doesn't seem that way. And we were looking at it to put a tree in each one of the sections. So the sort of the grass section in the front of the house is divided by the walkway to the house, to the steps. And so if you plant a tree right in the middle there, it might work. That's how limited it is. But it wouldn't. You can really put two trees that then turn into, say, 15 feet, high and maybe 10 feet across. There's just not that much.
Okay.
We're, one of the purposes of this section, putting aside the numbers, one of the purposes of this section is to create visual interest.
Absolutely.
To kind of, for the benefit of all assembled, to sort of screen buildings, even if they're nice-looking buildings and things like that.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, did you at all contemplate something up toward the sidewalk? On either side of the walkway, perpendicular to the walkway? I know other properties have little lily, right near you, have little lilies right near their walkways, or just some visual something or other to break up that slope.
My concern with that, if you look at the properties next to it, both to the right and the left, there's really nothing there. And my concern is with the plowing, the walkway plow that comes around, that if you put it too close to that, that I think the chances of survival, again, are, my guess they're going to be minimal. And there's some setbacks as well that we have to adhere to, right? Which
The plants can go up to the setback.
Up to the setback. So
I understand, especially if you're not talking a tree. That's one of my questions for you, Kate, is a lot of the landscaping is about trees and shrubs, not necessarily annuals or perennials.
Yeah, good point. And as soon as I started asking about that, I actually corrected myself that lilies won't do the trick, even though there are in fact some next door.
Lilies would survive the plow, but we're talking trees and shrubs, and those.
Different.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile just to run through what the actual stated purpose for this requirement are. It says provide direction to and enhance building entrances, enhance and shade walkways, provide visual breaks along blank building facades, intercept and filter stormwater runoff, and it says plant materials should be planted in groupings and distributed around the areas of site visible from public vantage points. And I guess I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you think the proposal that you've put forward accomplishes those goals or doesn't accomplish those goals.
yeah, my sense is, where the shrubs are planted right now, there's a couple right next to the porch that if we planted some more there, they would have sort of a visual impact, and so that would be a benefit. If perhaps we planted a tree in each one of the grass sections, both to the left and right, that would eventually sort of grow to have an impact. And we're not talking about, conceivably we could plant something that won't take that long, because it's not a tiny tree, so to speak. So So those are the things that we're thinking about, maybe a couple of trees and additional shrubs that stand a chance to survive.
In the photo, we see an apple tree next to the right driveway. Is that still there?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that on your property, or is that?
No, that's on the property next door. Because yeah. It's quite an old tree as well.
Okay.
I'm just pulling up my phone so that I can see what you're seeing.
It looked like it's in photograph, I think it was the one that was numbered 1. And actually, the Google Street View shows it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
So are you now proposing, in addition to an additional hydrangea on either side of the existing hydrangeas,
Yes.
putting one tree in each side of the front?
Yeah, I think we could do that, and that would work well, and so eventually it might look like that tree that you have, the next door.
I guess just to take some testimony on it, do you think planting 40 additional shrubs and 6 additional trees would serve the purposes that I described earlier as far as the landscaping requirements?
In theory, if you had the right conditions, yes, that makes...
I mean, on your property?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. It's just, you look at it and you go, well, this doesn't make sense here. It won't have the visual impact that you're wanting for it to have, and there's just no room on either side of the house, and that's where the length is, right? So most impact, I think, would be in the front of the house.
And do you feel that adding 2 hydrangeas and the trees as you described would meet the goals that Ryan read?
Yeah, I would think so. That would be definitely a visual improvement. Yeah.
Well, and I would envision that at least the trees in the front yard, you'd want them as ornamental rather than, say, like a large deciduous tree that's going to fall into your house with a canopy, or grow into your house with a canopy.
Right.
Just because of the limited space that you have between the front yard, wherever you have to plant them and your house.
Right, right.
Okay. Any further questions?
I guess just to confirm, you are proposing, as here, a crabapple or cherry tree in the front yard.
2 of them, one in each sort of grass area to the left and right of the walkway, yeah.
In addition to the 3 that you're still proposing adding in the back? Is that?
We could. I don't think they have as much impact, but they certainly add to the greenery. We could do that.
What's the pleasure of the board? Any further questions? Yeah, I think I think we have examined this to the highest degree. What's the pleasure of the board? Do you wish to take this under deliberation, or Ryan, I'm seeing a no, ready to make a motion?
Sure, yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the minor site plan application at, did you give me a draft? Hold on, let me just, give me half a second. Oh yeah, there we go, great. I'll make a motion to approve the application for minor site plan approval and to grant an exception to the section 3203 landscaping minimum requirements as presented in the application with the addition of 2 additional crabapple or cherry trees in the front of the house as described by the applicant. And with the additional condition that the landscaping be maintained in a healthy condition and that dead or dying plants be replaced within 1 growing season with a comparable plant.
Okay, motion by Ryan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kate. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. All right, your permit is granted. There will be a written decision issued shortly through the zoning office. And but have a good evening.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, the next item of business falls under other business, as I said at the beginning. We are going to hear from the city. I'm not going to put anyone under oath, and just as a guideline to what's going to be discussed and what's going to be reviewed, my understanding is that this is an informal review. Nothing that's being discussed counts as either testimony towards the application. It's just an opportunity for us to review the project, hear some details, ask questions, hear comments from the public, which will be given an opportunity. If you are a member of the public and do wish to make a comment, I will ask that you go to the microphone that's right there, and please state your name, just so we have a record of that. And also state your address. If you're not a resident of Montpelier, then you don't have to state your address. Just simply say you're not a resident but wish to speak. We won't stop anyone from out of town speaking.
And if possible, if you do speak, also sign in on the sign-in sheet, please.
Okay.
I was going to actually give a sort of a procedural overview that's in some ways more for the board members, but also for members of the public before Greg gives his presentation, if that's okay?
That'd be great.
Okay. It is getting recorded, too. Okay. So, in this instance, as most, if not all of you are aware, the city has taken over the parking garage project that had been approved previously for the Hilton and Capitol Plaza project under permit number Z 2017-145. The garage proposal now has a larger footprint with 128 more parking spaces, and one section of that, approximately in between 50 and 40 feet, depending on where you measure, of the building, is now going to be on the city leased Heaney lot. So just logistically speaking, there are 3 big steps that are going to be happening that are going to be going through the Development Review Board. We're going to need to amend the prior hotel site plan approval to change it to off-site parking, at least a portion of the parking. That application and approval is going to be under the old 2006 as amended through 2011 regulations. Then the hotel has also applied for a subdivision of its lot so that a portion of the lot will then be granted to the city. And that will be a subdivision under the new regulations. And then the city has to apply for site plan approval of the modified garage plan. Even though it's a modified plan, the entire plan needs to go through the full site plan review process. That also includes design review.
Is that because it's under new ownership?
It's because it's a new applicant, new ownership, new design, everything gets triggered. Just so you know, as with the old garage, this is in the river hazard area, but you won't really need to worry about that. There will be notations on some of the plans that have to do with river hazard, so that because that's going to be reviewed independently but concurrently by the floodplain manager. So just another warning, amidst all these applications, I will be appending in legal opinions that we're anticipating getting, because there's going to need to be a parking agreement between the city and the hotel for that off-site parking. We're going to need an opinion regarding the construction of a city-owned building that crosses onto leased versus owned land and how we deal with that. And then there will need to be a right-of-way or easement agreement dealing with frontage or creation of a city-owned road. So those are 3 big things that are going to come in that weren't necessarily dealt with under the prior garage.
Could you repeat what the first legal opinion will be regarding?
Well, it's not necessarily a legal opinion, but a parking agreement. There needs to be an off-site parking agreement, and that's part of the hotel amended site plan approval.
Thank you.
Yep. So after tonight, the next big hearing will hopefully be the October 1st sketch plan review for the subdivision for the hotel. That application is in, so that looks to be set to go. That's the next hearing here. And then, assuming that everything gets in on time for the October 15th Development Review Board meeting, you will see altogether the site plan amendment, because that really has to happen first. We have to have approval for that off-site parking for the hotel for any of this to happen. Then the final subdivision review, and then site plan for the new city garage. And one reason we're trying to put it all together is because otherwise there's going to be a lot of explaining if there are members who are there for, say, the site plan amendment or subdivision, but aren't there for the final site plan. It's all interrelated.
Now, will design review take place simultaneously with this?
Design review is going to be happening as long as application deadlines are met on October 1st. This is the tentative proposed schedule, assuming all goes as planned.
Right.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. I understand there's a concurrent public outreach and feedback process being undertaken by City Council? And could you tell how that process fits in and whether it will constitute testimony before us, or if it's just a separate conversation that helps create the application, we'll see?
Yeah, that's not going to be testimony before the Development Review Board. It's, that's potentially testimony before the City Council. There is a hearing on Wednesday, special City Council hearing, at 6:30 on Wednesday, and it's a separate layer of the decision-making process.
So that's more about the town working on its proposal with public input. That's what it sounds like.
That's
I'm
my
seeing a nod
understanding,
from the
and I'm
city
sure
manager.
Sue or Bill could talk more to that later.
Okay. All right, just in case folks were sort of curious how all the moving parts fit together,
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify
But yeah,
that.
that's the city making its own decisions about design, and then that design still has to be approved through zoning and the Development Review Board.
The applicant.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So Greg, please introduce yourself and let us hear your proposal.
Thank you for your time this evening. My name's Greg Rabideau from Rabideau Architects.
Be careful about the microphone.
Yeah, I see it now. I'm Greg Rabideau from Rabideau Architects, and we're pleased to be here presenting the latest version of this project. We started this process back in the fall of 2017 or 16, and went through. It was 16, and the end result was the existing Capitol Plaza would remain. There would be a new 84-unit Hampton Inn and Suites and a 220-space parking garage. As time went on, the city and the applicant had lots of conversations about how there's a greater need for parking than just what this project requires. And so now I'm before you to present a new thinking on this, which is to take what we've done and build on that to increase the total parking to 348 spaces, and to there'll be some other things as we talk. When I first got up, I handed you this, and if anybody in the audience would like a copy, I have extra copies here. But this was just graphically cleaned up to make the plan a little easier to read.
And just to be clear, we're talking about sheet number, it's marked SP-1.
Yes, it's a sketch subdivision plan with a revision date of actually I put the 20th on there just because I needed a separate date from the earlier versions. The purpose of this document is to just try to help you understand the configuration of the lots, the big blocks that we're working with here. So as I look at the plan, you see up in here the Capitol Plaza portion of this currently extends back behind Christ Church all the way to the Haney lot. You'll see right down there in the corner where next to the new hotel is a proposed lot number 2. This is the parcel of land that will be calved off the original Capitol Plaza lot and gifted to the city as a part of this exchange of values to underwrite the construction of the garage. So the original one lot will become 2 lots, and of roughly 2.19 and about a half an acre, 0.54 acres. Then the third piece that I need to direct your attention to is a sort of shaded area that runs through lot number 1, and it's listed as a proposed right-of-way or easement. We're waiting for guidance from the city on what precise form that's meant to take, but the idea is that this is the deeded access to the garage, which otherwise would not have direct frontage on State Street. So the purpose of this was just to illustrate those three components. As it happens, I was fortunate enough to get an actual survey from Civil Engineering Associates earlier today, and so I have also incorporated actual surveyed values for the shape of the Haney lot and the buildings around it to help facilitate discussion with the board and with the public as far as how this thing fits into the fabric of downtown. The city managers have been undertaking public outreach to hear some concerns. One of the concerns that was raised by a citizen was that was this thought that we should look at the possibility of future reuse of this as something other than a garage at some point. So the second small package I handed you tonight is an alternative version of the plan that I'd like to talk to you about. So we're going to be talking about the garage itself and the fact that it can be configured in more than one way to do the job. I think the concern raised by the citizen was that, maybe people won't be driving cars at some point. If the city owns this building, what are they going to do with it? So we undertook an investigation of whether or not flat floor plates with steeper ramps could be employed in this location, and the small package I gave you is the result of that exploration. We're going to present both options and keep both options alive until the city council declares a clear preference. So,
Mr. Whitaker, if there's a document that you...
He's referring to, that's...
Right, I'll seek for clarification. It doesn't necessarily, it's sort of intimidating to lean over someone's shoulder. Just so we understand what packet you're talking about, is it the A102 series of maps?
On the title block of Simon's Engineering, who is our parking lot consultant, and it starts with A101 and goes through. Essentially, we...
I have A102, A103, 104, A105, and 203. Is that...
That's it.
Okay.
That's the whole of it. The two options are the original concept, which would be a helical design or sort of internal ramping. That's been part of this design since the approval. So that way you would drive in on level landings and the parking bays themselves would ramp up. There'd be level landings at each end of the building to turn and go again. The design being contemplated under the new regulations allows for a different configuration of parking bays. So one significant difference in the original concept or the approved concept over what we're proposing now is that we've eliminated angled parking. And this is good because given the volume of parking we have without the angled parking, it was solving a problem that the regulations have now solved for us, and we can eliminate that angled parking. So these would be 90-degree parking stalls, 18-foot parking stalls, 20-foot drive lanes, and 18, so on and on. Advantages of this particular approach, it's probably the most efficient of garage designs. The slopes that it would take to get from one landing to the other are 3.5%, so they're less than the ramping you would normally need for accessibility, which means in general it's a more universally friendly design because you can park at various places and it's still accessible to get to the elevators. This is a design that lends itself to the use of precast concrete construction, which is desirable in this case because it's more durable, and the city the city cares about durability, obviously. In the alternative scheme, the parking levels are flat, and at each end there's something called a speed ramp, which goes up a half level or 5 feet. One obvious benefit of this is that then you have flat floor plates, which could have some adaptive reuse in the future. But I'll have to talk to you about why that may be limited. One thing about that is those ramps are pretty steep. They're like 15%, and that's fine for parking garages. You've probably all used parking garages that are like that at some point or another. I know the one that springs to mind is the one at the airport up in Montreal, but there are other ones closer by. This is also a good scheme. The levels would be split lengthwise so that if everybody has that last page, that A203, it shows in section form how that looks. So you have the flat floor.
Yeah, be careful.
Sorry. Or there's two of them, sorry. Interestingly enough, though, when I posited this challenge to our consultants, they said, we can make the geometry work, but in order to be able to convert this to some other use in the future, we would have to increase the structural strength of the building, because cars don't weigh as much as office space, believe it or not. It really shocked me, too, with the live loading is like 25 pounds versus 40 to 50 for office space, or, and on up. So the city has a decision to make. We can make either one work. We took this request seriously, but this would end up, if you were going to design it such that it could be converted to office space in the future, it's our professional opinion that you would increase the cost of the structure possibly by as much as about 30%. So that's going to translate into a serious budget problem. I think the consensus among us with the city manager's office and city staff is that the budget is not so fat that we could absorb that. But I want the public to understand that we have looked at this issue seriously, and this can remain a live issue, but the problem will not be one of geometry, it will be one of dollars and cents, if that makes sense.
And just to be clear, Greg, this is more informational, I presume. This isn't necessarily one of our zoning bylaws that's going to be triggered by one or the other design.
No, this is us listening to the public, and I'm sharing it with you because we're going to, until there's a final determination made by the city itself, and we're here to support you in this effort, we'll keep the options alive, keep the discussion going, because
I just want to be careful because, when you describe something like that, I may have personal opinions about it, but that this isn't really necessarily going to be the ultimate forum to decide that. That sounds like something.
No, it's not.
And that sounds like something that the city has to consider probably through their public process with the city council.
Exactly so. Yeah.
Okay. And I just want to.
Now, there's city as regulator, and we're here to do that tonight, but there's also city as owner and representatives of the general population. So I felt it was important to sort of give you a little of that history, because at some point we're going to come back here in October with more complete designs, and you could see either one of these. Our strong recommendation is to stick with the original design because it's efficiency and it's it's a more user-friendly kind of configuration. But we will support the city in either direction, and both of them work.
Can I ask a question about the cost piece, and building on what Dan just said, that does not, it's not one of our criteria for
Right.
the ultimate approval. It's this curiosity. When you're talking about cost, are you talking about straight up construction cost, or is there any sort of a life cycle analysis that has been done taking into account possible future reuse, tax revenue, or things like that?
No, this is strictly a bricks and mortar kind of proposition. Because to go from 25 pounds of live load to 40 pounds of live load a square foot it's an increment, but it's a significant increment. And so the columns and beams and everything would have to be just a little bit more beefy to handle that problem.
Residential and office are the same as far as the load required?
Yeah, in residential, it's typically 40 in the units and 80 in the corridors. We'd have to somehow figure that out. But It's funny, I mean, you take a 2,000-pound car and you put it in a 200-square-foot parking lot, you know, it's not that much weight, even though it all rests on the tires. I was very surprised. So there's the issue of the functional relationships of the inside of the garage, which is something that we're going to come back and say this is how we're going. And then there's also the issue of the exterior appearance of the building has been raised a number of times. Our approach was hammered out over many, many meetings with the Design Advisory Committee and the previous membership of the Development Review Board, some overlap, I understand, but and it included a combination of masonry, stone, and a fairly significant amount of something called a green wall or a living wall, which the renderings show best. I think there is hopefully there's a rendering in your packages. There was. I have a black and white version of it here, but
I don't think we have that.
I don't have that end of the particular package.
okay. You know, I can bring this up and just kind of let you get a look at it, but this is the extended version. Okay, so you have the high area, but this is just the same. So the one that you have.
Okay.
So it's a, and it is, again, this is the same concept, just so yeah, I think the board appear to have enough to sort of understand our proposal. This was our proposal. It evolved to be this way for several reasons. First of all, in order to avoid mechanical ventilation of the garage, we do have to have 50% of that facade open to the air somehow. And this is a kind of clever way to allow that to happen while still giving some sense of enclosure. It also came about after several lengthy discussions with the members of Christ Church Episcopal who have plans to develop the rear portion of their lot at some point in the near future. And they didn't want to be looking out at a blank wall or a hardscape. So the proposed solution that we offered at the time was to explore using this living wall material as a way to, so if they put a housing project on their property, they'd be looking out at green growy stuff and not necessarily. And also we felt that given the footprint of the building and everything, it would be desirable to break the facade up with more than one treatment. So it's doing several things. And perhaps since not everybody was on the board when this came through, our landscape architects, Wagner Hodgson, have done this in numerous locations. They're proposing a wide variety of plant materials, Boston ivy, Virginia creeper, trumpet vines. Trumpet vines, in particular, they grow everywhere in Vermont, very hardy. If you have a wood lot, I live out in the woods, you're familiar with trumpet vines. And then, we picked things for initial fast growth, but also long-term durability. These are all urban kind of friendly plants, and the estimated initial grow-in is pretty quick. It was estimated during the previous permit rounds that within 3 years you would have substantial vegetation on this matrix. We still are advocating this solution, and yet we are taking public input on the exterior design as well, which is separate from most of the permitting issues. I expect when we come back to see you in October, we'll have a definitive answer on this, but we're advocating for this right now, and then hope to try to incorporate questions and interests coming from the public to try to enhance this design. It's happened pretty quickly. I know just taking the thing and stretching it out may not necessarily in the end be the best result. So we're going to take the idea of stretching it out and try to refine it so that it's better composed, more proportional, all those good things. In both of these schemes, it's hard to sort of define floor level, but essentially the flat scheme would have it's because it's a split level, one level would stick up about 5 stories. In this ramp scheme, the original scheme, we kind of come up to sort of 4.5 levels. Total height on the scheme as proposed is like 45 feet to the parapet, with a section where the elevator and the stairs are that sticks up a little bit more than that. And that is in a district that allows 6-story construction. At 45 feet, it would still be substantially shorter than the recently approved Hampton Inn. And some technical things will be going into this application. Dealing with floodplain, the garage will, in fact, have some flood storage capacity in its footprint. It's designed to sort of minimize the importation of fill into the area by sort of leaving it hollow inside. And if I'll have to explain this in more detail after you've had a chance to look at it, but stormwater in a flood event could flow into the lowest level and through the lowest level and back out without impacting the structure negatively. And that's kind of wet floodproofing, I guess, is what they call it. But we've been working very closely with AUDRA and also with the state to define the best practices for doing this. But for now, I think it suffices to say that it's very much a part of what we're doing, and we are taking that, we're working that issue hard. If you look at my plan SP1 again, you'll see at the easterly end of the parking garage, there's a sort of shaded area, and that is there simply to indicate how much longer this garage is versus the one that was previously approved. That's something I want you to sort of understand. When we say, well, how far over the line does it go? Obviously, now you can see with all this sort of triangular geometry that there's no one number for that. But I did, to the extent that I had that information, I labeled it on the plan. Unfortunately, at 11 by 17, it's probably a little hard to read, but it is, I think it's like 40 feet on average more. One other feature that I think I would point out to you, just because it's important to know, is that we are still maintaining a green buffer on the northerly side of the garage, basically at the southerly portion of what will be the city's lot, as an accommodation to the folks at Christ Church and their future project. Given the changes in the numbers and geometry, because of the new regs, that is shown right now at just a little under 8 feet. It's at 7 feet 9, but we are preserving that feature. Even though it's a little bit smaller, I think the essential function of that is I think, in keeping with our commitment to Christ Church, and I'm bringing that up for their benefit more than yours, but just to let you know that. We are also going to, when we come in to amend the Hampton Inn site plan, we'll probably have some vertical control changes. The basic layout will remain as it has been, but you may see some changes in the grading plan as we finalize our understanding of the stormwater regs. But the essential plan as presented is what we want to go with. No proposed changes to the hotel structure itself in terms of the number of rooms or the height or any of that. The changes would really be the imposition of the easements, the calving off of the lot, and whatever technical changes we have to make the utilities work in this kind of new configuration. So I think that's everything. I'm sure you have questions, so.
We do. I'll lead off just a couple of questions. You have the width of the proposed right-of-ways that are going behind the Capitol Plaza in front of the Hampton Inn that are going to be granted to the city for access?
It's currently shown at 22 feet. We've had an ongoing dialogue with Public Works. The most important thing to them is not sort of the horizontal geometry, but the cross-section of that road, that they want to make sure that it's the underlayment, the pavement, and the stone subbase are built to city street standards to support heavier traffic, which we anticipated anyhow, because we expect there's still a lot of truck deliveries that come through here, there's buses that'll come through there, so that's something we have agreed to, but right now it's shown at 22 feet. And if, once we have guidance from the city as to what form this needs to take, if it needs to be 24 or something other, it could be.
And just in comparison, say like Taylor Street, how the traveled area on Taylor Street is going to be?
I've never measured that personally, but I think it's going to be very similar. I mean, I've driven across that bridge a million times, and I know that's not 20 feet wide, but I don't think the pavement's really that much wider. Our car is 6'6" wide. A typical travel lane is really 18 feet, or is really 8 feet. But two 10-foot travel lanes with no parking on either side, or if there was parking, would be outside the right-of-way, is more than adequate.
And are you anticipating submitting a traffic study?
We are. A traffic study was undertaken under the original design, which swept up the existing uses, the new hotel, and a 220-car parking garage, distributing trips to both Taylor Street and to State Street. Resource System Group is currently feverishly working to update that report to reflect the increased volumes. We're, on our side of the table, are not entirely clear yet from the city as regulator whether or not they would like to see a more expanded traffic study. It's a tough call because everyone is well aware that at the wrong time of day, State Street can get pretty bottled up, and that the intersection at State Street and 14, Main Street, can be problematic at certain times of the day. But one of the initial approved plan that we went through, in the end, we found that traffic was acceptable. So what we have to evaluate is does that additional 128 spaces, is it significantly generating traffic, or is it capturing traffic that's already here, which is, I think, the hope of the Downtown Business Association. But we'll have to evaluate whether or not that additional 128 spaces generates significantly more traffic that would impact that in some way.
Sure. I mean, obviously, you're free to make the argument that it does or doesn't, but I think it will be helpful. In part, at least my concern, I'm just one member, is that, before we were talking about a parking garage, I think in a limited scope, which is that it was always meant to serve the private property. So it was intended for the Hampton Inn and its guests, and possibly the Capitol Plaza, and possibly an arrangement with some of the tenants. Now we're talking about an expanded garage that's going to be likely serving a more general public. And I don't know how the city is allocating those additional spaces, whether they're going to be rented out to people or to the general public. But it would be good to understand those traffic impacts. And if the argument at the end of the day is those additional 128 cars don't amount to a hill of beans in an already busy State Street, that will I think I would be curious to see that data in support of that.
Right. Well, next time I see you, we'll have something from Resource System Group on that level. I think what we're still discussing, and we need to get to a bottom of pretty quickly, is, how far away from the project entrances do we go to look at the impacts of this traffic as it's distributed out into the city? I can't say much more about traffic.
Okay.
It's not my expertise, but
sure.
we do have one in process, and it will come in October when we come to see you.
I just think that that's likely to be an issue, and so feedback to your team and to
Understood.
RSG, they will want to have something. At least I'll be looking for something.
There's a strong desire on the part of the design team and our city clients to try to make as much of this parking available to as many people as possible. We're looking at various kind of parking management equipment that would allow us to advertise available spaces. The one long-term agreement for parking that I can definitely speak about is the one that will be given to the Capitol Plaza. That is in exchange for them giving the land and doing all that, but they'll be participants in the garage still. In the earlier approval processes, we had, I think, identified 174 spaces required by your regulations to serve that completed project. We still have something like 51 surface spaces that will primarily serve the existing Capitol Plaza and their commercial tenants on the ground floor. But, I think Christchurch will probably participate in this garage if their housing project goes through. And I know that we want to have some of this available for downtown businesses. It's very important. So.
If I could speak to a little bit of this discussion.
Yep.
So, first thing to note is that under the zoning regulations, even though maybe the board could ask for more traffic study information, there's nothing in the regulations with this particular project that is triggering a more in-depth traffic study. The Department of Public Works at this point is driving to what degree the traffic study is adding information at this point. And then some information I have for the breakdown of traffic, of parking spots right now, is my understanding, and people who are here from the manager's office might be able to update this, is that we're talking about 200 passes for the hotels, 30 passes eventually that would go to the Christchurch housing project if that were to, assuming that happens. In the meantime, those would potentially be just part of the hourly parking. Another 38, so a total of 68 that would be hourly parking. And then they're looking to try and find other people to rent up to 80 monthly parking passes. So it'd bring us to 348 spots with 104 flex spaces. So that's the current breakdown that the city's playing with.
Forgive me, I'm going to ask a question about the traffic study. You may have just told us that you had told us everything you know, but I'll give it a try anyway.
Good.
As we think about the scenarios to test in the traffic study, it would be interesting to test a scenario that assumes those 80 spaces for rent are contracted to the state, for example, for a replacement of the car lot parking. Because I think that 80 spaces that are coming and going at state office opening and closing times would be a different impact on the area than if those 40 spaces were for that, or if 80 spaces were for downtown businesses. And so I think that would be useful to know, if possible.
I'll talk to our traffic consultants.
They may already be doing it. They may just be doing PPM or whatever.
Well, some uses are going to be less problematic in terms of the worst hour of the day, which I think is right around 4:30, 5 o'clock, right? At both ends of State Street. And maybe to a lesser degree, sometime between 7 and 9 in the morning. But I think the PM peak hour is definitely the design hour here. Hotels, check-in is at 3, checkouts at 11. They tend to be off-peak. And so, other uses like that. I think if the church had a housing project there, they'd be sort of off-peak or at least counter-flow. They'd be more likely leaving town than coming to town during the work hours, right? But yeah, I'll put that in the mix.
I just might put that back in there here. Already did that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, next question, at least I had, beyond the traffic, I'm looking at the SP1 design, and it looks like the new parking garage juts out into the Mary Heaney Trust lot.
It does.
And that's the portion that the project's going to be leasing from the Heaney Trust? Is that correct?
No, the city leases the Heaney lot now. They have a long-term lease on that lot. I think the legal question is, they're going to be building on that lot. That's not for me to settle.
Right. No, and and to a certain extent, we don't have to evaluate the legal documents. We just simply have to understand that such are in place. But at the same time, I'm trying to understand. So the way this building is situated, or at least the way it looks, the building fills up the back of the lot, and it looks like there's about, print's a little small, but at the front, it looks like something like 24 feet from the edge of the building to the boundary line, and then it narrows in the back to about 10 feet. Is that, is there any plans for either that area or access to the area behind it? Is that presumed to be for different use? One concern, obviously, that we have is when we create these type of, or give permit approval to creation of these type of lots, are we cutting off other uses in that? And is that, I mean, it looks like it's a significant portion of the back lot.
Couple of things. Common to the railroad tracks, the city of Montpelier already has an easement through this property for their bike path, their expanded bike path program. So on the south side of the garage, there's going to be the bike path, and there's also going to be some site development in previously approved sort of park-like environment with bike tools, and there are different little granite blocks emerging out of the ground at different elevations for seating, and a lot of landscaping. That we've always envisioned that sort of south side of the garage, sort of facing Memorial Drive, as being as having quite a bit of plant material growing on the building, but also, next to the building, right? So that, to sort of rebuild the river's edge, which normally has trees and stuff growing along it, and also to shade the bike path and to screen the building a little bit. Access to that would be, there's an accessible route that goes from State Street down past the facade of the Capitol Plaza and the Northfield Savings Bank, between the hotel and the garage, and then there's a direct sidewalk connection to the bike path there. So the public access is meant to go down through there. On the east end of the garage, where you're talking about, there is an adjacent property owner, I'm thinking it's Overlook Park, LLC, and that small little barn-like building.
Sure, the old garage.
The old garage. And so down through there, I've maintained a driveway access to, they have a small parking lot behind that garage. So there is a surface, there would still be a driving surface going around to get to that rear parking lot.
Okay, but then beyond that, where, it significantly narrows.
Yes.
I mean, would that be maintained as a pavement or drivable area? And then behind, and then to the south of the garage, but to the north of the proposed bike path, is that?
I think if we can successfully preserve the rights of the folks at Overlook Park, anything beyond that driveway connection, in my mind, ought to be planted. I mean, there's no practical way to get parking back there, and it seems there's an opportunity there. The north branch of the Winooski River is right there. There's a new bike path bridge that parallels the bowstring truss bridge that goes over the river now. So there's a lot of stuff already going on in there.
I just think, I understand it's not strictly within the sort of four corners of the specific permit of the garage, but it seems to me it's also logically implicated by this, and so I don't intend to push you to design on the fly if there haven't been thoughts, and obviously
there have been. Wagner Hodgson is preparing an updated landscape plan. For the green wall system to work, we have to have a certain amount of sort of at least 2 or 3 feet of soil at the bottom of the wall for those plants to take root in. They don't need much, believe it or not, but they do need something, and so, at least immediately adjacent to the building, we're going to have landscaping, but in my mind, anything south of that south wall of the garage really ought to be parkland.
Okay.
We may in fact have some depressions or things. We may do some earth forming too as part of our flood management scheme, but it would all be greened up.
I look forward to seeing what you come up with, but I think it's going to have to, we're going to have to take a look at that. Any questions from any other board members?
Yeah, just a question regarding that Overlook Park LLC section there. Did the CEA survey cover the entire lease lot, shall we say, or was it just the exterior of the lot that's being subdivided? So was the line between the lease lot and Overlook Park survey, is that shown part of the CEA survey, or is that?
Yeah, everything east of our original property boundary and the easterly property boundary of Christ Church is, that everything from here over is surveyed, is from CEA, based on a lot of intense deed research. So, no, I think that's what we're excited to present this new plan to you tonight, because it fills in a lot of gray areas to have that there. But, yeah, that's pretty accurate. It is accurate.
Okay. Any other questions? So I don't know if members of either the public or other interested parties wish to make a statement or ask questions. I'll facilitate. It'd be helpful, given that, we're going to be reviewing this, it would be helpful to direct any questions you might have to the board for us to consider, as opposed to, this really isn't an opportunity for cross-examination of witnesses. So, the floor is open if anyone has any questions or comments.
I guess the city's not going to, Stephen Whitaker, Montpelier. I want to just call your attention to, I'm pleased that I'm hearing that work in the diligence around the process of severing and reapplying and which regulations we're going to go under. That's good work. The traffic study, I believe, is also very key. I have been asking for, but not been able to get hold of the prior traffic study, I guess done by Resource Systems Group. I will continue to follow up on that. There's a lot of good work in here, but fundamentally, it's my informed opinion that this is just the wrong place for a garage, especially a bigger one, because it's going to further encroach on the river. There's a confluence park that was ironically approved on the same night that the city council voted to proceed, and it's going to basically be isolated through these four-story urban canyons to even get to that park. So the impact on the farmers market. This is going to chop off, this is the first good scale drawing that I've had. I've been trying to model it hypothetically. It's going to basically eliminate about half of the area currently used by our farmers market. I would ask you to take a very close look at the idea of just using an easement through a canyon of two hotels parking lot in the interest of public safety, because if there's any emergency ambulance fire incident having to go on, no one's going to be able to get in or out of that garage through either of these driveways. So there had been talk of creating a full street, but that would eliminate all the perpendicular parking that's on either side of that 20-something foot right-of-way. The increased, I imagine this in the zoning regulations, the increased load of salt and sediment and debris falling off of automobiles with the increased surface area of the garage must be considered as potential pollutants. I did not see plans sufficient enough to show whether those were being captured and treated before they were released into the river under the prior plan. The view shed analysis of this 45 story, this is the first night we've heard that number, 45-foot parapet plus elevator and stairs. Its impact on view, I walked this whole circuit, that whole block, and took photos, and it's, from many angles, it's going to totally eliminate the view of our numerous church steeples, or from some angles of the State House. And those are huge pieces of our town, capital city character. So I think I've just raised some red flags for you to, I will be providing, further information as this unfolds, but I understand this is under an accelerated timeline to get a city council vote to get it on the November ballot. And I don't know how much pressure is going to be brought to bear on your process and due diligence.
Well, we don't have an accelerated process here. It's going to go under the normal review process. So, for example, site plan has to be divided into two parts, which is part of the reason. Now, there's no requirement that the two meetings be separated by any type of intervening meeting, so you can have them as rapidly as possible. But obviously, our goal and our job is to simply review and vet this, but again, under the very narrow confines of what we're charged with under the zoning regulations here. And so, for example, that internal design, that's part of the reason why I made a point about that earlier, is that, there may be good reasons to do it one way and there may be good reasons to do it another. That doesn't necessarily come under our purview, and that's to a certain extent what the city council has to do in their review. And we have to look at the very specific provisions of the bylaws as to, its function within the zoning regulations.
I understood that traffic studies were part of that, and I'm somewhat surprised or seeking clarification on that from Bill and whom in the next few days.
Mr. Chair, if I can just make a clarification. The subdivision plan has to be in two parts.
Right, that's
Okay,
what I said.
You said site plan.
Oh, I said, my apologies. I was thinking subdivision. I almost said site plan again. So as far as the traffic goes, there is no formal requirement for a traffic study except in conditional use that requires it. However, the applicant is required to make some showing on the impacts of traffic, and given the size of this project, that's my recommendation. It seems as if the applicant is in the process of doing that, of providing that kind of data, as opposed to, say, with some of the earlier applications this evening where we were talking about very little, and we could take it simply at the testimony of the applicant that changing a one or two-room office to a two-room bedroom or residential use isn't going to have a traffic impact. And so part of it is just proportional. This is a much larger project, and I think it makes sense, and it sounds as if the applicant wants to meet that as well.
Sorry, can I ask a question? You said you've been asking for the traffic study. That should have been part of the original hotel and garage application process, and I wasn't quite clear that that's what you were looking for at some point when you were in our office. Is that the case?
I have a pending request for traffic studies. I'm getting the 1990s stuff. But
You can, if you just come down to our office, it may be in the application file, and I'll be there tomorrow.
And will the traffic, do you look at the traffic impact of having three simultaneously construction projects of a hotel, a parking garage, and a transit center all at the same time? Even if it's only a year long, that could totally gridlock our town.
So to a certain extent, the answer to that is you're welcome to put on that type of evidence. How we evaluate it is governed by the bylaws. And so what we're going to be looking at is what the scope it allows us to look at. I mean, obviously, it's zoning, so our ultimate focus is on final use. But if you're going to raise concerns, and they're valid for temporary site construction issues that are likely to cause traffic, it's kind of like the way we impose certain erosion standards during construction. But a lot of that is aimed at how do we mitigate an impact that's obviously going to exist if there's a construction project,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One point of process, when the chair says strike that, does that mean Orca has to go back and
No.
keep it?
No, that's just an old lawyer habit, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals that wish to provide any comments, questions? Any other questions from the board members? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to hearing this with your sketch plan review in 2 weeks.
Do you have a small set of the, that's combined? Okay, no, that's fine.
I'll make sure I bring extra copies next time.
Well, does Bill have an electronic?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different on the, well, no, I think it's actually completely the same on the back,
That's kind of a diagram.
yeah. Okay, we do have to continue with our meeting, so if there's any conversations.
Good work, by the way.
All right, our next, the only other business is our next regular meeting, as we've mentioned before, is scheduled for Monday, October 1st, 2018, 7 p.m. here in City Council Chambers. And that is all business unless anyone has any other issue that they wish to raise. Hearing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Or motion by Rob, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Ryan. All those in favor to adjourn, please raise your right hand. We are adjourned. Thank you all.